As of right now, live, this is the 9th, and it's 8:34 p.m. And this is the Alaska U.S. Senate. They only have, 58% reported. Now, the election was last Tuesday, and this is now Monday, and they're only at 58%. Alaska, what's going on? Alaska.
They gotta go by Pony Express to get the votes in.
And the
Bro,
reason,
a moose ran into the polling center.
Alaska told Nevada, hold my beer.
The reason why I bring this up, though, is because this is a pivotal race where even though it says 62% for the Republican, 32% for the Democrat, everyone has their sights on Georgia, because there's two Senates, rightfully, and they have a runoff. But this hasn't been called yet. And from what Al Gross is saying, he could just be, blowing smoke up everyone's behinds, but he's saying that he believes he's going to win once the rest of the counts come in. But from what I understand, though, they are going to start back counting tomorrow. I don't know why they're waiting so long.
I think they received some votes, and it was about like 191 or 191,000, and a lot of them going to Trump. Nobody's really asking to recount those. So all those mail-in ballots that they actually got were in favor of Trump. They're not claiming fraud on there. It's funny that there's no fraud in Alaska.
There's no fraud in Alaska.
You know what the funniest bit about the fraud is? Everyone, it's all fraud to get the president, but all those people, they had to mix in some down ballot Republicans just to make the fraud feel real. Democrats were like, let's take power away from Trump, but nah. Let's lose the Senate. That'll get people on their toes.
Yeah. What kind of weak fraud is that?
The last thing I'm going to say about this is I was listening to that show with Katie Alper and Matt Taibbi, The Useful Idiots, and Glenn Greenwald was on there, and he talked about the Brazilian process. And basically, he said at 6 p.m., they stopped voting in Brazil. The polls closed. And as soon as 6 p.m. hits, they have 90% reporting because they start counting before. I think the day before, they count before that. So as soon as 6 p.m. hits, boom, they got 90%. And then it only takes 2 more hours and they have the 100% reported. And this is Brazil, a country with not the same amount of money that America has. We're the wealthiest country in the world. And they're able to figure this out. Now, the population, because they have their electorate, their citizens can start voting from 16 years old. If you count all of those people, they have about the same amount of people that votes, and they have it down packed. I'm sure they do paper system as well. So we got to figure something out, all right?
Yeah, I mean, the mail-in ballots, I'm sure they don't have the same issue with mail-in ballots, though. The thing with the states here also, as far as the mail-in ballots, is that it varies by state. Some of them could count right away. Some of them you could count the day of you could start. Some of them you got to wait until the polls actually close before you could start counting them. So
I
it's
hear
a big mismatch.
My thing is,
it took Florida 20 years to get it right, but they did it. If you want to look at it, Florida starts 5 weeks in advance. So if they want to look at an example of like a state that really messed it up and a state that finally got it together, they could look at Florida. But the thing is, like we always talk about, all these states that are taking longer and they claiming all these issues are Republican-run states. And it's Republicans governor. So if they have problems with it, they should take it with their own party.
Well, I don't know if you know this question about Brazil or the answer to this, but is every jurisdiction the same rules? Because over here, every state basically runs their own system.
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think because Glenn talked in such generality, if that's a word, I think that's probably what it is. They do it across the nation of Brazil that same way. And I agree with you, Carlito. For this election, we probably had a whole bunch of issues because of COVID. But I think moving forward, we have to have at least some kind of standardization. Like Florida did get it right. You're right, John. They start counting like a day before or sometime before the actual election day. And I think that's maybe something that we should do. 50 states, like certain standards, start counting before. You have the same checks and balances so that we don't have any fraud, or we make sure that we have body cams of people watching. We have all parties involved, Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, have poll watchers at every poll and get it done, right?
Yeah.
And Case,
Yeah.
you mentioned some standardization. Like, I wanted to ask everybody, what are your thoughts on coming up with like an agency that's like the national standards of voting, where all states would follow this like set standard, whether it's everyone allows mail-in ballots and it's up to like kind of take like whatever the best system is and roll it out across the boards. What are people's thoughts on that?
I mean, we have the Federal Election Commission already, so they could take that on. The problem that I see is that, you know, specifically some red states, they're going to start saying states' rights. For that, I would say, well, do whatever you want for your state elections, but make it standardized for the federal ones.
I would point to the Civil Rights Act. Recently, we had the Supreme Court that struck down if they made any major changes, certain states that were known for voter suppression back in the day, in the Civil Rights Act, they made it a requirement that if they made any changes, they had to go to the federal government first. And that prevented a lot of the suppression that we now see since the Supreme Court struck that part of the act down. So I think that if that was put in place to keep a check on the states, I think something like that could probably be put back into play.
See, I was going to say, that's a fantastic idea. Great for democracy, great for turnout, and that's why it'll never happen. Do you think that making voting easier is something that Republicans want? Even this election that showed increased turnout is good for Republicans. Look at Florida. Increased turnout can be good for Republicans. They don't care. If you make voting super easy, Mississippi is the blackest state in the United States of America. Look at Georgia. If they make voting as easy as it should be, states like that will flip left and right. In this messed up system, in this slow bureaucracy of voting and states being able to pick and choose, that's their bread and butter. They love making things complicated just so that they can be like, oh no, oh sorry, it's a little hard, you just shouldn't vote. And then Republicans just vote. That's why. There's no other reason. There's no real argument against it besides more people will vote and Republicans don't want that.
Yeah, so we definitely need to take on this issue more seriously, and we have to come up with a solution. I personally, we talked about this in the last show, in the last clip, that I want all mail-in ballots, have a FedEx-like tracking system, have a very robust body cameras on the people counting it, a way to secure the vote, and we need to get that resolved. So, all right, let's move on to the next.
I was about to say, don't the ballots already have a QR code and some other crap?
Yeah, no, Case, before you move on, I do want to touch on the fact that the USPS expedited a bunch of mail-in ballots without scanning them just to get them sent faster, which made it so that a lot of people couldn't actually track their ballot. But in Florida, you can check the status of your mail-in ballot as soon as you drop it off or send it, and have almost a 1 to 2 day turnaround time on having dropped it off or mailed it.
I heard California has something like that as well. We just, like Gabe said, if we could find a way to standardize basic things, like we don't have to standardize everything, but I think there should be basic requirements. All right.